Well, good morning, everybody. I tell you what, man, we've been waiting for this day for a long time. A lot of folks has made this day a reality for us, and so, and it's Easter on top of that, which is a great festive day of celebration. We're still trying to work out the kinks. We hadn't figured out what the table's going to look like or where in the heck I'm going to preach from. And all those types of things. So we're trying to work a lot of the logistics, and communion is going to be we're going to try to do like we've been, but we'll see how it goes. You're adults, so you can figure this out. This is what we're going to end up doing. But I tell you what, since y'all are here, I got to get some advice from y'all. I can't find anybody that wants to talk to me, so I got to take this opportunity to share some things, get some advice, and then we'll get started with the rest of the service. I had a friend who is about 10 years older than me, had a conversation with me. He's struggling a little bit with life. He's struggling with his finances, and
we're still figuring this out.
That was subtle. I didn't know, well, you're there. Like a thief in the night, man. So anyway, having this conversation with this with my friend, and he's struggled with his finances. He doesn't know which way to go. He wants to retire. He's at the retirement age, but he doesn't think he can do it. And so I said, well, that's fine. So we had coffee together because he's seeking me out because I'm the financial guy, right? That's why I went to seminary. So I don't know why he asked me to do this, but he did. And so he started talking about all these things that I didn't have a clue what it looked like. And I have this Craig Atherton blood in me, right? I said, give me a chart. Give me some kind of a graph somewhere so I'm a visual person. I got to see something that you can show me but I know what you're talking about. So he kind of reluctantly pulled out his financial portfolio, I guess. And then he found a chart, and then he placed it in front of me, and he showed me this. Look, just like this. My first response was, well, I laughed, is what I did. I laughed, and then I said, this is, wow. Hey, you mind if I show this and use this as a sermon illustration on Easter? And he said, no. So I forgot. So here we are. And so anyway, so when he showed me this graph, he immediately began to kind of defend it, right? He started looking at it and going, since it's 1952 when his parents started this thing for him, all the way to the present day. Actually, it's 2012 is when that graph stops, but it's actually longer than that and further down the hill. But he was talking about this. He began to start to defend it. He kept saying things, like this. I don't know if you can see this from that far. This slight trend downward. Can you see it? Can you tell it's going in that direction? This slight trend downward, it's going to fix itself. It'll bounce back. We just have to be a little patient because annuities are coming back, right? They're going to make their rebound here, and then stocks like Kmart and Sears, they're going to come back. Butchwax is going to be the thing of the future. So all we have to do is just kind of be patient. And his retirement is going to return back to the glory days of what it was in 1958. I need some help with this guy, because he's not listening to me anymore. And honestly, I said, I don't know anything about finances. But I do know ski slopes. And that's a good ski slope, especially for the last 10 years. It kind of has some really good black diamonds going down there pretty quickly. And so he no longer listens to me about any of this stuff. And so I'm trying to figure out, if you were in my shoes, is there any sage advice that you would give me to tell this person? I could just say, this isn't from me, but But, anything? Just tell them to hold on. Things are going great. Sell now. Sell out. It's good. Pray a lot, yeah. Pray is a good thing. That always changes stock. Anything else? I could tell. Huh? Wake up, smell the coffee. Don't look at the facts. Here's one of my favorites too. If you don't talk about it, you just be positive. Right? That changes everything. That's how we used to handle conflict in my house. You know, when I was growing up, then it just turned into fighting. So we kind of resolved that. So there's all sorts of things that I have to have a conversation with them on this. Now, okay, it's Easter, so I kind of told a fib. This graph really is not my friend's financial portfolio. This is a graph of church growth. Yeah, or decline, I guess is a better word of that, since the 1950s. Now, for this congregation, like 100%, that's pretty much everything, right? Like 100% of other mainline congregations in our country, the early 60s were the peak years. Late 50s, early 60s, we could not do anything wrong. It was awesome. Now, for those of us who think, well, 1960s, that's not that long ago. You have to realize that was over a half century ago. Put it that way, and it kind of makes us wake up, right? So, at the same time, in 1964, something big happened in this congregation. You know what it was? We moved to this campus. Do you know that? We moved from downtown Weatherford, and we moved out here into the country when the church looked like this. All right? Can you visualize that? And when we moved out here and bought this property, I think it was 63 or 62, the church went crazy. What are you doing? Who wants to go out there, way out there in the country? It was a dirt road that went by this property. Nothing good is going to happen out here, right? And this was over half a century ago. And so this is when we were at the peak time. We were doing great at that church. We walked up and had this church and started this church with a communion service. In fact, May the 6th will be our 125th year of our first worship service from that place we left downtown, Brownstone Chapel. So if you looked at that graph that I just showed you, you being the wise sages that you are, how would you respond? And would you respond to church decline graph in the same manner or concern that you would your financial portfolio? Think about that one. I mean, what if your finances are going down the tank? What would be the first thing you'd say? Take it internationally? Okay, let's take church internationally. Yeah, let's do something different. Something's not working. This isn't happening. Annuities are the things of the past. How can we do something that will help us get our line back to being effective in the life of the church? It's a big concern. By the way, this is my 30th Easter sermon. I preached 2 sermons on Easter, so that's actually 15 years, so it's not that big. I guess in reality it'd be my 60th. So anyway, yeah, I'm near the end of that rainbow, or whatever verbiage you care to use for that. But this is my 30th sermon on Easter. And I think one would think, as do a lot of my peers, that Easter's got to be the greatest time to preach. There's so much excitement, so much joy. You got people coming in that you haven't seen in a while. You have families bringing their children, their grandchildren. It's a great festive time. It's kind of a neat tradition that families do. They take a whole section in the corner of the sanctuary, and so it's one of the most enthusiastic times. And it should be one of the greatest messages we could ever hear in the history of time. And I think that's what most preachers would say, but y'all have noticed this. I'm not like most preachers. I'm rather odd, I know that. Easter, in all reality, is the most difficult sermon to preach for me. And the reason that it is has a lot to do with this graph. This graph really concerns me, and it has for quite some time. It bothers me. This graph hurts my soul because the church means everything to me. The church saved my life, literally. The church rescued me from the depths of this hell that I had been living my life in. The church loved me when my family was not capable of loving me as a person when I was in high school and junior high. But this church loved me, even knowing that the very things that I was doing just the night before, and the night before that, and the night before that, were bad things. But the one thing they kept doing was they persistently just kept showing me love and hope. They expressed so much hope for my life, and my future looked so good for me. They showed me grace, and for the longest time, I would just scratch my head and say, I cannot figure out why in the world this group of people would do this. The church took me in when I was trying my best to, one, be an alcoholic, and two, be a high school dropout. I was trying hard. But they took me in. They got my grades up. They prepared me for college. Then they made sure I got there and never looked back. The church resurrected my life. And when I see this graph, it hurts. Because what this graph tells me is that the church is not concerned with reaching lost folks. If it was, then this graph would be reversed. This graph tells me that we have somehow lost touch with society. And that the way that we share the message of Jesus Christ is not a relevant message to a changing society that we live in. This graph tells me that the church does not believe in resurrection as anything more than just this lifeless body going up to heaven when we die. So how does the message of the bodily resurrection resonate with a society who is struggling to live life with purpose? This is the answer. But you know what? This graph doesn't tell the whole story. Because if the church and Christianity in America is going down, something has to be going up, right? Isn't that the way it works? So let me ask you a question. What is the fastest growing religion in our society today? See the red line? Fastest growing religion is no religion at all. No religion goes up. Christianity goes down. Within Christianity, even in America, what has also gone down is our passion for reaching the lost and instilling hope in all people of all walks of life everywhere we go with everything that we do. And what goes up in the life of the church is apathy. caring less for the lost and caring more for members. That just came out this week. Well, happy Easter, by the way. Did I say that yet? Now, let's go to the next stage. This church, this congregation has been confronting this trend for quite some time. We have been working hard to try to understand what is going on in our society and the life of the church. And then we have made this hard decision to make some changes, to go against the grain of what church has always done and move into a new era of what church was really created to do in a society that we now live in. We have made a turn to reverse this trend, and it hasn't been very popular with a lot of folks in the community, with other churches especially. And you see this reverse in the trend in our campus. I don't know if you noticed that on the way in. It has a different feel for it, doesn't it? A little more comfortable, relaxing, less stressful. We've made this trend, this change, even in the leadership of our elders, who are united and sharing and hopeful. We've made this turn even in our leadership. We're expressing this trend and change of shift even in our ministries, which, by the way, next Sunday, we're not having traditional worship services like we are, but at 9 o'clock we'll be meeting here for one worship for a brief setting, and then we move out into the community for our church in the community. So it's a great time. If you don't know folks and want new people, grab these groups of people, and we go off and we do our tasks, and we come back around noontime, and there we have lunch together, and then we learn our experiences that we've taken on that particular day. 30 Easter sermons. And nothing is more drastic than it is today. But let me tell you what, those Easter sermons I've had, I cannot remember one of them. I have a hard time remembering my kids' names, but much less an Easter sermon I did in the past. But there's one sermon that I never forget. An Easter sermon. The greatest sermon on resurrection, given by a guy who lived in the 30s and the 40s. You believe it? It's the most relevant sermon, even for us today, is what we're experiencing today. Now, when I say this guy lived in the 30s and 40s, I don't mean the 1930s and 40s. I mean the real 30s and 40s. That was a few hundred years ago, right? There was this guy named Peter who preached this sermon. It's in none of his books. It's told that it was one of his books. But if you know anything about Peter, Peter was one of Jesus' most famous disciples. He was also a guy who was his most flamboyant disciple. He was the one who told Jesus, if you remember, that, hey, let's don't go to Jerusalem. I think something bad's going to happen. Let's just camp out here and roast marshmallows. It's in the New Translation. And it was Jesus that said, you know, get behind me, Satan, because this is the way that we're supposed to go. And then once Jesus said that, then he says, all right, Jesus, I'll tell you what, I got your back. Anything happens to you, I'm right here next to you. I will not let anything bad happen to you. I will protect you. And then Jesus turned to him and says, you know what? Here's the truth. You're too scared right now in your life to man up. And so Peter gets his feelings hurt. And so when Jesus' time had come and he'd been arrested by the people and put before all the officials of the church, where was Peter? He didn't man up. And so you fast forward to his arrest, to his trial, then you go through the cross, the crucifixion, he gets put in a tomb, he gets buried, put away. And where are the disciples? They're hiding for their lives, thinking that they're the ones that are next. But when Christ rose, whether it was in person or just in a vision or in a dream, he appeared to who? Peter and others. And the first act he did was not to say, Nah, 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 nah. But I forgive you. And then even further down the road, he began to empower him. He breathed life back into him. He gave him a purpose. He empowered him to do great things in his life. Why? Because of his experiences of shame, of guilt, of grief, of failure, of heartache, of tears of regret, tears of pain, tears of shame. When he wanted to end his life, but he chose not to, he hung on. Peter's life was suddenly resurrected by that. So the question that I get is, why would you choose Jesus? Why would you want to follow him? Why do you want to be a part of the life of the church? Because my answer is this: who else does these kinds of things? Who else is so eager to love us and to love the unlovable? Who else is so eager to forgive us of our worst things that we've ever done? But you know, it doesn't even stop there. It goes even beyond forgiveness. Because who else would believe that we can take a horrible situation that we find ourselves in and turn it into a productive life that belongs to us, that we are become stronger and better and more powerful and more loving than ever before? Who can do that? Who does that? Curtis McDonald's been begging me to watch this show on Netflix. So I do my usual thing. You got it, buddy. So this last thing he wanted me to do, he says, well, here's a clip from the show on Netflix called Conversation with God. Is that right? Is that the name of it? And so he showed me this clip, and I want you to watch it. It's God having a conversation with one of the guys, and you can tell which one got it because he's the gray-haired white guy, right? Watch this. In his sermon, near the end of it, Peter has these words that he shared with his people. After you suffer for a little while, not if you suffer, but after you suffer. After you suffer for a while, this God of grace, who has called you to the eternal glory in Christ, is going to restore you. He's going to support you. You will be strengthened. But more importantly, you'll be established. And your ministry will really then begin. This Peter, this disaster of a disciple when time was needed the most, began to realize that all of those experiences that he felt through either the poor choices he made or just life's bad breaks has really began to equip him to do some pretty amazing things. We have to get over this notion that God causes bad things to happen to us. We don't worship a God like that. And anybody that says we do, they've missed the boat. They need to wake up. Because bad things happen. It's called life. Exactly. So after life's harshness, when he returns to Jesus, Jesus says to him, Peter, we got this. We got this. Not only will you rise from the ashes of pain and suffering, I'm not going to leave you in the ditch. I'm not going to abandon you. You shall rise and you shall take your place among your peers, and you will be a beacon of light in a world of people who do not know hope. Who does this? Where do you find this, people? Where can you take all your broken junk and just lay it at the table and say, man, I'm broken? And to see God heal you and make you stronger and take you in and say, I'm going to empower you to do some great things with your life that you never dreamed that you could do. Peter's life did not really change until far after Jesus died. He was kind of doing what we do, going through the motions, you know. Front row seat to church. But not until after he suffered that he began to realize what he was capable of doing. Never knew it. You know what I call that? I call that resurrection. I call that something we're celebrating. Something that we need. Because it makes us who we are. You know, and we gather at this table. You know, we don't do it just because it's part of the program, right? Because it means something. It's the only time in our lives that we get to come face to face with the body and the blood of Christ. But not just face to face, but, you know, even more intimate than that, we get to take that in us and wear it like a coat and be anointed or empowered to go and do the very things that he was capable of doing. And so we come up here to take this bread and this cup. I want this attitude of help me, heal me, create in me, use me to be the person that you need me to be. To start life over again, and whatever that looks like to you is what it looks like. Let us break bread together. Let us come face to face to the one who longs to be face to face with us. Let us pray. Almighty and gracious God, you are far more wonderful than we can realize. In fact, it seems to be so true, so hard to believe that we can become the very people and vessels that you need us to be. Forgive us when we all look at all the things that we see in ourselves that are broken or that are wrong and allow those things to define who we are when they're not. Your grace is sufficient enough for us because in spite of what we have become or what we think we are, you love us more than we ever could realize, more than we could ever love anybody else or be loved by anybody else. So on this day of resurrection, come into our hearts and our lives and help us to believe in ourselves the way that you believe in us. And when we take you into our hands, the bread and your blood, allow that to go into our very hearts, our minds, our souls, and our bodies, that we can become instruments of your love and your hope and your grace. That we can learn how to love even when our mind tells us we shouldn't. Because love, as you say, covers all sorts of sins. Help us to understand ourselves as your priesthood, as your believers, as your children, created in your image, and wipe away all the self-doubt that we have, that we come to your table with our tears and healing and hopefulness. Guide us, we pray. Amen.